Thank both of you. It's an honor to be on the panel with all three of you. My name is Ed Taylor, and just mention a couple of things. I grew up in the Central Valley of California, just north of Los Angeles. And it was an interesting place and an interesting time to grow up. Because it was after the death of Martin King. I have a vivid memory of the moment that he was killed. My mother was crying, and this is a woman who didn't cry, who never cried, but she was crying, and I went into her bedroom, and she grabbed onto me, and she held me, and she was rocking me back and forth, and she was just weeping, as if she had lost something tremendous. And I remember I didn't know why she was crying, and I didn't know who she was crying about, but I remember seeing this image on the television of King's death. And I remember the sense that part of what she was crying about was that the movement would now become part of her legacy. It would become the responsibility of everyday, what Sly Stone calls everyday people. And that she was one of those everyday people. But the 70s were kind of an interesting time to grow up, because it was not, we were not, many of us, not the activists that Bernard was, with the clarity of conviction. And this was an interesting time in the media also, because as a young man, I would turn on the television, and there were prominent shows like Good Times, Jimmy Walker, who would smile and say "dynamite" with this big smile on, and they're living on in an apartment. This image of poverty, but moving on up to the east side to a deluxe apartment in the side. So poverty was somehow funny in the form of J.J. Walker. We could sit and we could watch it and laugh at it and poke fun at it. There was different strokes. A family, I think, a black family adopted by a white family, and this young man would look over and say, "What you talking about, Willis?" And we would laugh at this young man. He was meant to be funny. We could giggle at the thought of interracial engagement. There was Sanford and Son. Fred Sanford would walk around with his son and threaten to punch people and hit people, and they'd make fun of each other. And they lived in a, what was it, what was it they lived? It was they lived in a junkyard, right? And the junkyard was the site of this comedic space, and it was funny. To live in poverty was to kind of poke at it and make fun of it. Chico and the Man. Jose Feliciano would sing the lead song, "Chico, don't be discouraged, the man, he ain't so hard to understand." This was Chico. They also lived in a junkyard. Images of poverty in the context of a junkyard that we can actually poke fun of and laugh at the end of a half-hour show. We would laugh at Chico and the Man. Then there were Rodney Allen Rippey going to Jack in the Box, and he would try to put his little cheeks around this Jack in the Box burger, and we would laugh because we're finally emerging in some space. And all the while that these images of poverty are kind of infantilized and funny and poked fun at, all the while in Los Angeles, you've got this chocolate city forming. You've got forms of segregation. Years after Brown versus Board of Education, you've still got largely segregated schools, and you've got largely segregated communities. But yet we're poking fun at poverty as if it's something to play with. There were moments, and there were signs. So when the trial happens, and for those of us who grew up with television, this was a powerful, powerful thing to see. And many of you didn't see it, and I don't know if I want to recommend that you go on YouTube and take a look at what came to be known as the Rodney King beating. But it was vicious and brutal. And it was put right before us, and I think it was put before us like violence has never before been put before us. We got to see a city burn. We got to see a black man get beat to the brink of his life, blow by blow by blow by blow. We got to watch the trial that couldn't happen in Los Angeles as the city was burning. The trial couldn't happen in Los Angeles. It had to move to Simi Valley. So when the verdict was called and all the officers were innocent, despite what it was that we saw, John Singleton said it was like lighting a fuse. You just lit a fuse. And the city exploded. And the reality of poverty, the reality of how fragile this democracy is, came right before our eyes because we watched this city burn. We watched a sense of rage. It wasn't funny. It wasn't infantilized anymore. We watched forms of violence that I don't think we've ever seen before, and it was hard to watch, and it was hard to reconcile. Left powerful images in my head for those of us that were trying to go to school and trying to go to graduate school. Found ourselves always having to talk about, is this who we are? Is this how people are? As an aside, I went to school in Spokane, and I went to Gonzaga University in the late 70s, early 80s. And it was an interesting and powerful place to go to school in the hands of the Jesuits. It was a really powerful experience for me. It was also really powerful and interesting for me that 10 miles across the border, 15 miles across the Washington border, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, Aryan Nation, largest enclave of Aryan Nation activity, was right there across the border. And so it was interesting, Joe, when you think about your own image, I would have to walk around the streets in Spokane. And if I left the confine of my campus and walked around, I'd have to look at some young man. I'd have to try to figure out, are you in the military? Are you just making a political statement? Or are you a skinhead? And I'd maneuver my way around and duck a little bit and maneuver around. On 3 different occasions, I sat adjacent to Aryan Nation rallies and heard messages of despair and anger and vitriol. And it was interesting to get up close to white poverty and to white hate and see that for people who don't have a vision of hope, they hold on to any kind of philosophy that they can, even if it's in the form of white supremacy. So the city of LA was burning. Rodney King became a symbol of blackness and forms of evil in this country. I want to conclude. I read a piece by Leonard Pitts recently, and it caught my attention because Pitts is commenting on Sean Grubert, who's an officer who also shot a black man named LeVar Jones. And Pitts is trying to understand why this happened. And he said, you know something, I'm starting to feel bad for the police officers who do these shootings, and here's what he says why. He says, who is he? He's a citizen of this country where the fear of black men is downright viral. That doesn't mean he burns crosses on the weekend. It means he's watched television, seen a movie, used a computer, read a newspaper or magazine. It means he is alive and aware in a nation where one is taught from birth that thug equals black, suspect equals black, danger equals black. Thus, it has been since the days of change, since the days of lynch law, since the days newspapers routinely ran headlines like helpless co-ed ravished by black brood. It is the water we drink and in the air we breathe. Perception out of all proportion to any object reality, yet it infiltrates the collective subconscious to such an unholy degree that even black men fear black men. He says it's in us. I get this sense, and as we talk about solutions, I don't know what the solution is, but if there are any lessons I learned from South Africa, there needs to be a truth and reconciliation conversation. And I'm reminded at times when I was a child and I went from baths to learning how to take a shower, I would step into the shower and step in and get wet and step out and claim that I'd taken a shower. And my mother said, no, you need to get in and you need to bathe. You need to get clean, and you need to scrub. I think these are moments when we need to not just step into the shower on this discourse about race and poverty and democracy in this country. I think we need to get clean, and I don't know that we have. So perhaps grist for the mill. So, thank you.